All right, here we go. Let me get my audio level set here. Welcome in. Um, this is the video series about doing in home elderly care. We have been talking in these videos about doing just that or caring for a loved one, like inside the home, or at least assessing for that and seeing if you yourself is a good candidate for it or how exactly you want to proceed with taking care of an elderly individual. Doesn't have to be an elderly individual. You could look at someone that just has a sickness or some sort of injury or something that might be medium to long term, where you've got to set up and schedule how to care for them for some indefinite period. With elderly care, you're usually looking at a years long process, and then obviously it goes to term, until they pass. It might not be that situation if you're just looking to care for somebody who's dealing with an illness or an injury or something to that effect. But pretty much here we talk about the elderly piece because that's what I have experience in. And I use my grandmother, Ruth C. Kenton, as an example in this series because I had a very high level of involvement in her elderly needs as she got older until she died. And as I've discussed in previous videos, her and my grandfather, that's what they did for 30 plus years or so. I mean, they were doing it before they were ever, officially on the books in a business doing it. And then they never truly retired because even after they sold their business, and they were getting up in years. They had their siblings coming over and their sibling spouses, and they were always involved in helping to take care of somebody until it became their turn to be the one who needed to be taken care of. And then that's when yours truly entered the picture. So the last thing that we talked about was assessing for the customer's buy-in, meaning that if you're looking to pursue this, you're going to want to have a conversation with the customer, meaning the elderly person involved, and make sure that you're on the same page with them. And if you look at that video, I go through some examples or some things that you might be contending with if you do have that conversation with them, and ultimately what you're looking for, and this is across the board, not just with the customer, but also with what we're going to talk about today, is you're looking for a very strong yes. You want full agreement from the customer. You yourself need to be in full agreement. And then, as we're going to talk about today, assessing for stakeholder buy-in, you're going to want to have full agreement from them. Because again, the process is so difficult that you want to mitigate as many challenges as you possibly can before you ever even start, because you're already up against the unknown of how long they're going to need this care, how their conditions might change, or for better or worse. Probably going to be worse though, and you need to go in with the best possible positioning that you can obtain before moving forward. And then ultimately, this is all because we're serving the customer. We want to do what's ever best for them and make sure that they are getting the best care that they need. So, with that intro, I'm going to flip over to the slides here. Boom. Let me see here. All right there. And let me pull this up so I can get a better look at it. So, again, looking at Miss Kenton, aka Grandma, aka Granny, assessing for stakeholder buy-in. So, when I first began this process of taking care of my grandmother, when I first began this process, I had a conversation with her. I started there. You always want to start with the customer. Anytime and we'll look at the process of change management at some point in this video series, but anytime you're introducing a change, the first person that you're going to want to discuss it with is the customer. So after I had the conversation with the customer and got agreement from them, I then needed to go speak with the stakeholders. Now, the first thing that we'll look at here is identifying the stakeholders. What is a stakeholder? Who is a stakeholder? We've got several different examples listed there. The customer's children, their siblings, their grandchildren, that's me, nieces, nephews, cousins, close friends. Stakeholders, the best way to describe that are essentially anyone that is involved in this situation that has some sort of personal, familial, or legal relationship with the customer. Okay? So most of the time in most families, I didn't put spouses up there. That would actually be number one. In most families, that's what you're looking at for stakeholders. So if my grandfather had still been living, he would have been the first stakeholder that I would have gone to and spoken about this after speaking with the customer herself, Ruth. But as I've discussed in the other videos, John had already passed away. He'd actually passed away a handful of years earlier before we started doing this and was not available because of that. And really, I think in most of these situations, if you do have an elderly couple and one starts declining faster than the other, obviously, and of course, that spouse is the first one to start picking up that slack or whatever that need is for the customer. But again, she was on her own at the time. Her situation was changing, and she was dealing with just all of the things of getting old that are no fun. And as a matter of fact, this wasn't a Ruth quote. This was actually a John quote. My grandfather said, "You don't know what it's like to be old and not be able to do anything." Man, that's got to be a hell of a feeling, right? We'll all be there at some point. So, because he wasn't available, and she was getting closer with me and my younger sister, we were kind of the first ones to discuss, how we wanted to move forward with her, and we got that. Okay, great. Now we need to speak with the other people involved and let them know what's going on and get them on the same page. Okay, we want to get agreement out of them, especially those that are close, familiar, meaning family, or have legal involvement with her. Okay, because there's just a whole battery of items that can come up when someone has a legal relationship with somebody else. And just to give a brief description, the way that my grandparents set up their estate was that whenever the first one died, the other one would have majority hold over the assets, and the children as well would have a portion of it. So at minimum, Ruth's children were stakeholders from a legal perspective, regardless of any where they were in their personal relationship at the moment. But it could be any of these items listed. Like I was saying, I was very much involved in her life. I had no legal obligation or responsibility to her. Neither did my sister, but it could be like that. You could have somebody like Cousin Larry, and Cousin Larry has her power of attorney or his power of attorney or something in that regard. Or Cousin Larry has been managing their properties, or Cousin Larry has been assigned to, managing properties is a big one, has been assigned to do something else on some sort of like legal or personal relationship. And Larry's involved. It's just the way that it is. I'm trying to remember exactly if I had the customer disseminate that information at first, or if I did, or a combination of both. I really think it was a combination of both, where we were explaining what's going on and looking to get agreement. And thankfully for Ruth's situation, everyone was pretty much on board. There wasn't a whole lot of disagreement, and I don't really know if that's common or not. I think a lot of it has to do with the individual that's going to be taking care of the customer, and whether or not that individual, just what's their reputation. I think my reputation in my family is, well, it's not negative. I've never done anything with the family that would make them outside of any, I guess, normal thing. Like being young and a knucklehead is probably the extent of the issues that I think my family might perceive with me. But there was never any kind of like, hey, he's struggling with substance abuse, or he's always in legal trouble, or he's, Granny told me one time that she left some money out, and then he came around, and then she couldn't find that money. There's not, at least to my knowledge, there aren't any stories in the family with me being associated that kind of behavior. And so I think from a baseline standpoint, my family understood that, and they too just wanted to do what's best for her, and wanted to make sure that she had some level of care, because here was the reality, is that something had to be done. It was just flat out getting to that point where something had to be done. And so that actually worked in my favor, because frankly, the way that would have played out is, okay, you don't want to go this way. Well, then what alternative solutions would you like to bring to the table? Which would be a heavier lift for them, or a heavier lift for whoever the stakeholders might be. And most of the time in life, and this goes for me too, this isn't a singling out or anything specific to my family, but just in life, we like to avoid complications, and we like to be in our routines in our life, and it can be difficult adjusting to a new change or a new task that you've been given, especially something like this that could be tremendously involved and a tremendous lift that needs to be performed, and it could just change your entire lifestyle. It could be expensive. There's a whole list of ways that this could affect you. And so we brought to them a solution. They were on board. That was pretty much the way that we went about it. And I've got the line there: state your intentions and goals. And that's I don't know if we were as direct as now, me being able to process this 10 years after the fact of when I initially started assisting her, to state it as clearly as that. But we absolutely did get our point across of making sure they understood her condition, where she was physically and emotionally, and what she wanted, and how I could assist in that process. I said to do individually or a sit down fashion. So I don't really think that there's a right or a wrong way to do this. It's based off of the context of what the stakeholders, the structure of the stakeholders that are involved are, meaning, are they all local? Are they spread out across the country or the state? Is it practical to get everyone together? I'm a fan of face-to-face meetings. That's the way I do my best communication. I think that if you can do a all-together sit-down, that's the best way to do it. Face-to-face sit-down is the best way to do it, because the other thing with doing things individually is it could come across like you're trying to have one conversation with one person and then another type of a conversation with another person. Hey, and families are complicated. Families get sensitive about that kind of stuff. I think we could agree on that, right? So if you can get everyone together in the same location, including yourself, including the customer, and present to them the plan and the goals, and this is the need, this is the solution that we're presenting, and these are our expected outcomes, it will make things a lot better and give everyone a chance to ask all the questions that they want and get everything out on the table in front of everyone else. That's another thing. With the stakeholders, you want to do as much publicly as possible, okay? Not public to like the public. Like right now, I'm on the real public. I'm on YouTube. That's the real public. No, not that. But publicly, meaning you don't want to either have or to come off like you're having one type of conversation with one stakeholder and another type of conversation with another, and then a third type of conversation with the customer. No, you do it up front and on board in front of everybody. All right. And then that way there's clarity, there's transparency, and you just mitigate a lot of this stuff. And then when you get Uncle Jerry or Aunt Lucy or whoever that wants to come back and ask you about something, it's like, hey, well, we established this. We were all there. We all had the opportunity to speak and ask questions and be heard out and da-da-da-da-da. So you really want to posture it in that way and make sure that everyone's just free and clear, okay? Be prepared for objections. Someone could have something to say about it. You need to be prepared for that. You don't want to be, and the last thing that you want to do when you're preparing is, no matter what happens, you cannot lose your cool. You cannot start using vulgarity or name calling or use this. Again, families are complicated. You cannot use this as a launching platform to talk about other issues that are going on in the family, have gone in the family, and have gone undiscussed or unresolved or anything like that. All of that stuff is completely compartmentalized from this conversation. And if they want to do that, then you need to be prepared for that. And I think a lot of times you're going to know, you're going to have an idea that when, such and such comes, it might carry a certain energy with them, or they have just proven themselves to be a personality type that is going to get nasty or make things nasty or make things about them or just something other than what the conversation needs to be at the moment, and to be prepared for that. And then like I was mentioning just a moment ago, one great question is, okay, well, what are the alternative solutions? What are the alternative solutions? And as the first video with doing an initial assessment, that might be, maybe there's no way to move this conversation forward with doing in-home elderly care, and you want to revisit a previous conversation, which would be about vetting all other options. And maybe you would want to look at that and say, okay, well, we could look at a long-term care facility, or have a professional come in and be with the customer, or just whatever. It might be just saying that it might be a good time to have other conversations that may have been had or not had, or maybe you had it with the customer but not with the stakeholders, or not all of the stakeholders at the same time. Those situations can alter or change, or people, the way that those conversations go, and those people can have time to think on it. That could be something else, is that we had this conversation, there was a decision that was made, but now we're 3, 6 months, a year removed from that initial conversation, and people have had a chance to think on it or do some research for themselves. Maybe they've got another conclusion that they've come to, and to be prepared if the conversation goes in that direction, or just be prepared for any kind of objections. And then if there's an overwhelming amount of objections, you're going to need to take that into account on if you still want to pursue this and move forward. And I get it can be very difficult. So, for instance, say, and I'm blessed that I didn't have this type of situation with my grandmother, but say that you are trying to take care of someone who's elderly, and one of the stakeholders is just, they've put their feet in concrete. They're not moving off of this point. They don't want to do it. They don't want it to be you. They don't want da-da-da-da-da. And there's no moving from that. that could be a showstopper, and if it is, you're going to need to figure out what some alternatives are. Maybe the other stakeholders can work with that particular individual that's having difficulty getting on board. Maybe the customer can work with that stakeholder. Again, not saying that it's definitely going to be a showstopper every time, but if this particular individual is also someone who's a legal stakeholder, it could get very complicated. And again, you are involved. You are involved in this situation about as heavily and as personally as any situation, outside of like a marriage or being a parent or some sort of relationship like that. I mean, it's a very high level of involvement. So consider that, because you ultimately, here's what happens. That stakeholder is going to put their foot down and they're going to pound the table and they're going to do all that. And then they're going to leave and they're going to go back to their normal life and not think about it again. Okay. And then after that, it's going to be you that has to live in the muck all day long. So you've got to figure out if that's something that you want to do. You've got to make a decision on that, and then obviously see what's best for the customer. Not having buy-in from one or all stakeholders is not the end of the world, but not having buy-in from the customer is. Yeah. You can work around stakeholders that don't want to get on board. You cannot work around a customer that does not want to get on board. And if you have a customer that does not want to get on board and it's something that you still want to pursue, then you could work that same plan in reverse, meaning that you would want to get together with the stakeholders and see if they would be willing to have a conversation with the customer to help get that customer on board. But again, you don't want to force this stuff because it's you just don't want to force it, just like you don't want to force someone to marry you. You don't want to force someone to have to go to work. You want them to be excited to do these things, because already going to work is going to have its challenges, or being married is going to have its challenges. You want it to be the best possible posturing possible prior to the situation ever started. And then the last note, which is a similar note to the assessing customer buy-in, which is be prepared to walk away. Okay. You've got to be prepared to walk away if buy-in cannot be achieved. You're there and you're going to do what you can do, but that's all you can do at the end of the day. I keep using the expression families are complicated. Well, it's because they are. As a matter of fact, families are probably, or at least on the highest level of complicated things that an individual is involved in their life. Maybe if you were on the Manhattan Project, okay, and you're like at the cutting edge of nuclear technology, yes, that's more complicated, okay? But just in day-to-day, regular world life, your family is pretty high in complication, whoever you are, okay? And you're not there to fix these long stemming issues in the family. And it would be nice. We all want to, right? We all have it in our hearts to want to posture things better, at least most of us. Actually, if you're watching this video and you're thinking about doing this, I would say that you're probably one that's like that. Someone that is not like that is not going to watch these videos because they're not even going to entertain the idea that they would even consider doing something like this. Not at all. Just saying, like, we all would like to have better families and to be someone that assists in that, but that is not on us, because what you find is issues going on in families and stakeholders and aunts and uncles and grandparents. It's all stuff that's been happening before you ever step foot on this planet, okay? and you just happen to enter in the middle of it. All right. And so it's not on you. So be prepared to walk away. And like I said, just because you have a moment or a season where you walk away doesn't mean that the conversation can't be had later down the road, but you need to make sure that things are set up so that you are empowered to do what you need to do for the customer. All right. And then, as always, there's my question slide right there. If you got questions about doing in-home elderly care, shoot me an email, give me your name and location, and we will try and hook you up with a response. Thank you. I appreciate it if you're watching these, and I will see you next time. Bye.